like a clash of styles, but this is just a whole lot of weird. We've got Eric Spicely taking on Markus Perez, and it's an interesting fight because, for what it's worth, Markus Perez can definitely hold his own on the feet. He'll get into an absolute slobber knocker. He'll take one to give one, and so far that's landed him a 2-3 record in the UFC. And for Eric Spicely, he's so crafty. I mean, that win over Ciel Magalhães to bring him back into the UFC, it was crazy. I mean, he knocked him out. You wouldn't think that he would have done something like that. But he's well known for his grappling and his jiu-jitsu. And he's such an odd shape and odd size in this division that some guys have issues with him. 6 guys in the UFC, including his last fight in The Ultimate Fighter, which was 3 rounds, so it counts, figured him out. And he's 2-6 so far in the UFC. He had those 2 wins away from the promotion with CES. He's kind of looked different since he's gone to TriStar and switched things up a bit. But his last fight to come back into the UFC, he was a sizable underdog taking on Deron Winn, and he absorbed a lot of strikes in that fight. It was just over a year ago. So we're getting a new look at Eric Spicely. We're getting kind of a renewed sense of Markus Perez, because the last time that he fought, he was welcoming Wellington Turman back in November, lost that one by decision. It was a somewhat close fight. But the trouble with Markus Perez is if he's going to win, you'd think the fight's probably going to have to take place, whether it's, in the clinch or it's in close proximity. That's how he's going to get it done. A guy like Eric Spicely, for him to capitalize, and listen, I'm going way back, but his fight against Kenneth Berg, if you remember it, over on The Ultimate Fighter, he just kind of swoops right in, gets the back, chokes him out. That's kind of that classic Eric Spicely, if you will. So it's an interesting one in terms of styles, like I said. What do you make of this fight here?
I think you're a lot more excited about it than I am. Markus Perez, we haven't really seen the best version of him coming into the UFC. I know a lot of people know him for his win over Ian Heinisch outside the UFC before he ever came in. And it was a great win because, of course, we know how good Ian Heinisch is now, kind of in retrospect. But Perez, that Turman fight, I was really down on him. I thought he was going to be able to get the win. And he did kind of that classic Markus Perez fight. He kind of bum rushed him, got tired, and then, that's it. He has a really bad habit, too, of when he gets tired, he does the thing where he gets his back against the cage. He just kind of gives up ground as the fight goes on. And he's not one of these guys who, even in the 3rd round, he's still got that same knockout power that he has in the 1st round. He really does only have a little window to capitalize. My issue, though, Eric Spicely gets hit. It's not like he's fighting a guy who has high-level defense or high-level head movement. You're fighting a guy who's very much well-known for absorbing strikes. And I know Eric Spicely was able to get that kind of fluky win over Thiago Santos. If you run that fight back 100 times, Thiago Santos wins that 99 times. It just so happens that in our world, the one time Eric Spicely...
Plus 450 underdog.
Exactly. Someone cashed in. Now, Eric Spicely, I think he does a lot of things well, and I do think he's somewhat of a bad matchup for Perez. The problem is, I just don't think we've seen a good version of Eric Spicely in a very long time. Because you have to think, his last loss against Deron Winn, it was a fairly competitive fight, but when you go back and rewatch that fight, it was him getting hit about 300 times, and then he would just throw this knee up the middle that would kind of stun Deron Winn every now and then, and those were really his only good moments on offense. But if that's your one area of success, Deron Winn's 5'9". You're fighting a guy who shouldn't really be in the middleweight division, who's kind of falling into your knee constantly. Perez isn't going to be doing that. I think Perez is good enough grappling wise that if the fight does hit the mat, he'll be able to get back up to his feet. The thing that worries me is, will Perez's cardio be able to hold up to Spicely's? Because the one thing we know about Spicely is if you're not able to get him out of there in the 1st round, he is just going to kind of, not zombie you, because it makes it sound like he's a little bit better than he is, but he is going to have that forward pressure, keep on going forward no matter what. So I think this will be, again, I've said this every fight now, this could be an entertaining fight. I'm still going to side with Perez, even though I don't have much confidence in this pick.
This is one of those fights where I kind of buried the lead from the start. So I talked about the striking of Markus Perez, but he uses that to set up the grappling, to set up the submission skills. It's one of those ones that, could it work against a guy like Eric Spicely? I mean, sure it could. Again, 2-6 if you want to count it that way in the UFC, and a lot of those losses are by finish, so it's kind of tough in that regard. But Markus Perez, you're right. Like, if he pressures, if he lands a couple of good shots, if he brings you down to the mat, there you go. There's the Markus Perez blueprint. Now, it hasn't worked against some decent strikers, the likes of an Eric Anders and Andrew Aldierte Sanchez, or Wellington Turman, who was a lot longer than a lot of the opponents that he might normally face. I'm really surprised here because I don't really like the odds and where they're at. Markus Perez, a minus 265 favorite. Eric Spicely, plus 170. It's one of those fights that I would stay away from because, again, There's a big opportunity for an Eric Spicely submission, especially as you go into the second and the third rounds. And if you look over on Tapology, out of 708 votes, 79% going with Perez, 68% predicting a win by decision, which is a little fluky or wonky, I guess. Now, we saw it in Eric Spicely's last fight, but that's against a pure wrestler and a guy who threw them hands. Against a guy like Markus Perez, it's going to be a totally different fight. So what's your final kind of outcome on this one?
I just don't trust Eric. Like, Eric Spicely to me is like Claudio Gadelha, only at 185. Every time I say he's going to win, he does it. And every time I say he's going to lose, he's going to win. But I am going to pick Perez in this fight just because I don't know what Eric Spicely does better than him other than cardio. And I know cardio has a much bigger factor than a lot of people realize, because the second you get tired, it doesn't matter how many skills you have, those are all kind of out the window. I just don't think Spicely, even if he's fresh coming into this fight 10 out of 10, and Perez is at like 1 out of 10 on the cardio scale, I don't think Eric Spicely's skills are going to outweigh Perez's skills in really any aspect of this fight. So I'm going to pick Markus Perez.
I think that's a terrible assessment.
That's
I think
fine.
that Eric Spicely's jiu-jitsu is
I think
great.
Eric Spicely's 2-6 in the UFC, and it's very hard to pick a guy with that record.
Again, his grappling, you can't deny it. You really can't, especially if you want to go back and look at that Thiago Santos win. Big one there.
I was in high school when that fight happened. It was 5 years ago.
People are going to say that you're still in high school, Matt.
That's
but
fine.
If we're looking at this one, yes, I would agree with the fact that Markus Perez, for sure, if he's able to get in there quick, close the gap, there's your early opportunity to a window when everybody's still dry and the fight's still new and whoever the referee is hasn't called a late stoppage.
Classic.
We'll see what happens in this one. I'm going to agree with you going with Markus Perez. It's a really interesting card. I mean, we've got 11 great fights you're not going to want to miss. You keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, and as we always say,
Let's get into it.